Olivia Clarke had always been a ghost in Harborview, Maine, and that's exactly how she wanted it. The seaside town clung to the rocky coast like barnacles to a ship hull, where tourists came and went with the tides, but locals remembered everything except Olivia's past. For 7 years, she'd run Harbor Light Diner from a weathered blue building overlooking the bay, serving comfort food with hands that moved with practiced precision, hiding scars that told stories she never shared. Every morning at 4 a.m., before the lobster boats headed out, fishermen gathered at her counter for coffee strong enough to wake the dead and blueberry pancakes that some swore were worth dying for. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What they didn't know was that dying was something Olivia understood better than most. They called her the Admiral behind her back, a nickname that started as a joke about her military-precise way of running the diner, but had stuck when someone noticed how she instinctively stood at attention whenever the national anthem played. Olivia was 38 but moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years making herself invisible when necessary. Her auburn hair was always pulled back in a tight bun, and her hazel eyes carried a vigilance that made even the rowdiest customers think twice before causing trouble. She wore the same uniform every day: black pants, sensible shoes, and a crisp white button-down under an apron that never seemed to get dirty no matter how chaotic the breakfast rush. A thin white scar traced her jawline, barely visible beneath. Carefully applied makeup, a signature she couldn't erase completely. The townspeople had theories, of course. Some whispered she was running from an abusive ex-husband. Others guessed she was in witness protection. Margaret at the pharmacy was convinced Olivia had been a chef for celebrities who'd had enough of the spotlight. Old Captain Reynolds, who'd served in 3 wars before retiring to Harborview, just nodded respectfully whenever she passed, one soldier recognizing another without needing words. But Olivia answered only what needed answering, maintaining an invisible perimeter around herself that clearly said, "This far and no further." What they didn't know was what lay hidden in the storm cellar beneath her modest cottage on the edge of town. Behind a false wall that wouldn't appear on any building plans was a secure room with reinforced walls, multiple communication systems, and an arsenal that would have made a military quartermaster whistle in appreciation. Weapons, tactical gear, medical supplies, and enough emergency rations to last months, all meticulously maintained by hands that had never forgotten their training. The room had no official designation, but stenciled on one ammunition case was a single word: Kingfisher. Every Sunday night, when the diner was closed and the town settled into its weekend quiet, Olivia would sit in that hidden room, methodically, cleaning weapons and checking equipment, while a secure satellite connection monitored frequencies no civilian should have access to. For just a moment, as her fingers moved through the familiar motions of breaking down and reassembling a modified M4, the careful mask she wore would slip. In those moments, she wasn't Olivia Clarke, the diner owner. She was someone else entirely. On this particular Monday morning, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, turning the dawn sky the color of bruised fruit. Not just weather, but something that would shatter the quiet life she'd built. Olivia was in the kitchen preparing for the morning rush, knife moving in precise, efficient strokes through onions for home fries, when her burner phone, the one hidden beneath the loose floorboard in her office, vibrated once. The vibration pattern was one she hadn't felt in 7 years, and it sent ice through her veins. She was wiping her hands on her apron when she heard vehicles approaching, not local trucks or tourist rental cars. These had heavy-duty suspension, diesel engines that purred rather than rattled and moved with synchronized precision that made her instinctively reach for the knife she no longer carried on her ankle. 12 men entered the diner in perfect formation, moving like water flowing around obstacles. They wore civilian clothes, too perfectly casual, too deliberately unmemorable, but Olivia recognized the way they scanned the room, positioned themselves, and maintained awareness of exits and sight lines. These weren't tourists looking for breakfast, these were operators. Behind them walked a 13th man, older, with silver at his temples and eyes that had seen too much. Commander James Sullivan, her former CO, the man who had given her the kill order 7 years ago, the one that had sent her into hiding. The other customers fell silent, sensing the sudden tension in the room. Olivia stepped from behind the counter, wiping her hands on her apron with deliberate calm. The movement concealed her check of the exits and assessment of the tactical situation. 12 against 1 in an enclosed space filled with civilians. No viable escape route. No choice but to play this through. Sullivan didn't introduce himself or the team. He simply looked at her and smiled with the confidence of someone who had spent years hunting a ghost. "Olivia Clarke," he said. Not a question. She didn't answer, just met his gaze with practiced neutrality. His smile widened. "We need to talk." The tactical team began politely but firmly clearing the diner, telling customers there was a gas leak that required immediate evacuation. Professional, efficient, leaving no room for argument. Within minutes, only Olivia and the 13 men remained in the suddenly too quiet space. Behind her, hidden in her office, was the go-bag she'd kept ready for 7 years. The passport and credentials for her next identity. The offshore accounts. The escape route she'd rehearsed weekly since arriving in Harborview, all useless now. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sullivan stepped closer, his boots making no sound on the worn linoleum floor. "We know who you really are, Kingfisher. And we need your help." The Cody name hit like a physical blow, but Olivia's expression never changed. Some secrets had a way of finding you, no matter how deep you buried them, and this one had just walked into her diner wearing tactical gear and government authority. "I think you have the wrong person," she said quietly, but the knife in her hand had already shifted to a reverse grip, a movement so subtle that only someone trained to notice would see it. Sullivan's eyes flickered to the blade, and his smile turned sad. Still Kingfisher after all these years, always ready. He raised his empty hands. "We're not here for retribution. We're here because Commander Bishop has been taken." This time, Olivia couldn't hide her reaction. A slight widening of her eyes. A momentary hitch in her breathing. Elena Bishop had been more than her commanding officer. She had been Olivia's mentor, the woman who had recruited her from naval intelligence into a program so classified that even its Cody name was a secret. A program designed to place deep cover operatives within terrorist organizations. Operatives like Olivia. "Bishop is dead," Olivia said flatly. "Died in Kandahar 7 years ago. I read the report." Sullivan shook his head. "That's what you were meant to believe. That's what everyone was meant to believe. But she's been running Operation Lone Star from the shadows. 3 days ago, she went dark during a meeting with an asset in Caracas. 12 hours later, we received this." He held up a phone displaying a video. Bishop, her face bruised but expression defiant, reading a statement in front of a black flag. Behind her stood masked men with rifles. The audio was muted, but Olivia could read Bishop's lips forming. Words meant for her captors. But Olivia saw what others wouldn't. The subtle hand gestures, the deliberately misplaced emphasis on certain words. Bishop was sending a message in the personal code they'd developed. "They know about Kingfisher. All operatives compromised. Ghost protocol initiated." Olivia's world narrowed to a pinpoint. Ghost protocol was the nuclear option, the complete burning of all covers, all safe houses, all operations. It meant Bishop believed the entire program had been compromised at the highest level. "Who else has seen this?" Olivia asked. "Her." voice dropping to a dangerous register that made several of the operators shift their stance subtly. "Just the men in this room," Sullivan replied, "and 3 others who are already dead." The implications crashed over her like ice water. If Ghost Protocol had been initiated and Sullivan was here, it meant one of 2 things. Either he was part of the compromise, or he was gathering the only people he still trusted. "How did you find me?" Olivia asked, though she already suspected. The answer: Bishop had contingency files. Sealed protocols that would only activate if she was captured or killed. Your location was in those files, along with instructions to bring you in if Ghost Protocol was ever initiated. Sullivan's expression hardened. You were her insurance policy, Kingfisher. Her failsafe. Olivia's mind raced through scenarios. Probabilities, outcomes. 7 years of peaceful anonymity shattered in an instant. 7 years of waiting for exactly this moment while praying it would never come. Who took her? Olivia asked, making her decision. We believe it's the Vesper Network, Sullivan said. Olivia went still. The Vesper Network. The shadowy organization she had infiltrated under Bishop's orders. The same organization that had discovered her true identity 7 years ago, forcing her to go dark and disappear. The organization whose leader she had been ordered to assassinate. The mission that had gone catastrophically wrong and left 3 of her team dead. If Vesper has Bishop, she's already dead, Olivia said flatly. One of the operators, younger than the others, with keen eyes that missed nothing, spoke up. She's alive. They're saving her for something specific. The video included a timestamp and proof of life. They want to make a spectacle of her. Olivia studied him. And you are? Lieutenant Commander Reyes, he answered. I was Bishop's second for the past 4 years. Until she disappeared and left you holding the bag. Olivia observed coldly. Reyes didn't flinch. Until she activated the contingency that led us to you. Her specific instructions were to find Olivia Clarke in Harborview, Maine. Tell her Kingfisher flies at dawn, and then follow your lead. The phrase unlocked something in Olivia, a compartment she had sealed away years ago. Bishop and her damned literary references. Kingfisher flies at dawn. The code phrase that meant total system failure, complete compromise, and the activation of the final contingency plan that only Olivia and Bishop knew existed. If Bishop's been taken and Ghost Protocol is active, why come to me? Olivia asked, though she was beginning to see the shape of it now. You have an entire covert operations division at your disposal. Sullivan exchanged glances with Reyes. Because the division is the problem. We don't know who to trust. Bishop's capture wasn't an accident or bad luck. Someone gave her up. Someone with access to her schedule, her security protocols, her safe houses. A mole, Olivia said. At the highest levels, Sullivan confirmed. Which is why Bishop's contingency plan bypassed the entire chain of command. Find Kingfisher, only Kingfisher. Olivia looked at the 12 operators standing in her diner. And them? Bishop's personal selection. Pulled from different teams. Different commands. No connections to each other, no shared history. The only common factor is that Bishop trusted them enough to include them in her failsafe. Olivia weighed her options, which were vanishingly few. If Bishop had initiated Ghost Protocol and specifically designated Olivia as her contingency, there was only one explanation. Bishop had discovered something so damaging, so catastrophic, that she couldn't trust the official channels. Something that required the one operative who had already disappeared from the system, who existed in none of the current databases, whose methods and identity were known only to Bishop herself. What makes you think I can do anything? Olivia asked, making one last attempt to cling to the life she'd built. Sullivan's expression softened slightly. Because you're Kingfisher. Because 7 years ago, you infiltrated the Vesper Network deeper than anyone before or since. Because you know their protocols, their safe houses, their command structure. And because Bishop believed you were the only one who could finish what you started. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. The life she had carefully constructed in Harborview, the diner, the regular customers, the quiet routine was already gone. Had been gone the moment Sullivan's team pulled into her parking lot. All that remained was to decide whether to run again or to face the ghosts of her past. "I need an hour," she said finally. Sullivan nodded. "You have 30 minutes. Then we move." As the operators secured the perimeter of the diner, Olivia retreated to her office. The burner phone had a single message, coordinates and a time, nothing else. No context, no explanation, just a location and 48 hours from now. Bishop's dead drop, her final insurance policy. In the small bathroom, Olivia scrubbed away the makeup that had helped create Olivia Clarke, revealing the scar along her jawline in its full, jagged glory, a souvenir from her last mission. She stared at her reflection, watching Olivia Clarke dissolve and Kingfisher emerge from beneath the carefully constructed persona. The woman who looked back at her wasn't the friendly diner owner who baked the best blueberry muffins in 3 counties. This woman had harder eyes, a sharper gaze, and carried herself with the lethal grace of a predator. This woman had infiltrated terrorist cells, survived torture, and eliminated high-value targets with cold efficiency. Olivia Clarke had been a ghost, a fabrication, a cover story. Lieutenant Alexandria Kingfisher Mercer was the reality beneath. And after 7 years of hibernation, Kingfisher was awake and hunting. When she emerged from the bathroom, Sullivan immediately noticed the change. It wasn't just the revealed scar or the way she'd pulled her hair back more severely. It was in her eyes, her stance, the subtle shift in how she occupied space. The diner owner was gone. 30 minutes isn't enough time to properly plan a high-risk extraction, she said without preamble. "We have a safe house 30 miles from here," Sullivan replied. "Full tactical suite, secure communications, everything you need." Olivia, no, Alexandria now, studied the 12 operators more carefully. They represented a significant cross-section of special operations capabilities. 2 snipers based on their calloused trigger fingers and watchful eyes. A communications specialist with the distinctive earpiece scar. 3 close-quarters combat specialists judging by their hand positioning. An EOD tech with the telltale burns on his forearms. A medic who was subtly checking sight lines and exit routes for potential casualty evacuation. And 4 multidiscipline operators who could adapt to any role needed. Bishop had chosen well. "I'll need everything you have on Bishop's movements for the past 3 months. Security footage, communications, mission reports, the works," Alexandria said, her mind already mapping contingencies and attack vectors. "Already compiled," Rhea said, producing the secure tablet. Bishop prepared this herself. "It updates automatically with her secured server." Alexandria took the tablet, noting the advanced biometric security. Only her fingerprint would unlock it. Bishop had planned for this moment with characteristic thoroughness. "One thing doesn't make sense," Alexandria said, looking at Sullivan. "If Bishop suspected a mole at the highest levels, why tell you about me? Why risk exposing her contingency plan?" Sullivan's expression didn't change. "Because I'm dying. Terminal cancer. 4 months left, maybe less. Even if I was the mole, I have no future to protect, no leverage that could be used against me." Alexandria nodded once, accepting the pragmatic calculation. Bishop had always been ruthlessly practical. "I need 10 minutes alone," she said. The operators withdrew to secure positions outside, leaving Alexandria alone in the diner that had been her home and sanctuary for 7 years. She moved quickly to the hidden panel behind the coffee machine, retrieving the emergency bag she'd maintained but hoped never to use. Inside were weapons, cash, identity documents, and the specialized equipment of her former trade. As she changed into tactical clothing, Alexandria allowed herself one moment of regret for the life she was leaving behind. The diner had been more than a cover. It had been a kind of redemption, a way to create something rather than destroy, to nourish rather than eliminate. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had found peace by feeding people in a small coastal town after years of dealing death in the shadows. But that peace had always been borrowed time. She had known it from the day she arrived in Harborview, had felt it in the vigilance she could never fully abandon, in the go-bag always packed, in the weapons always maintained. You can leave the war, but the war never leaves you. Alexandria secured the tablet in a waterproof case and slung the tactical bag over her shoulder. At the door, she paused for one last look at the harbor-like diner. On impulse, she moved to the register and withdrew the day's cash float, nearly $2,000, and placed it in an envelope with a note to Jenny, her part-time waitress. The place is yours if you want it. Sorry for the short notice. Oh, it wasn't much of a legacy, but it was something. A final acknowledgement that Olivia Clarke had existed, had meant something, had made a small difference in this corner of the world. Then she stepped outside, into the gathering storm, where 12 of the most dangerous men in the world waited for her orders, and Kingfisher took flight once more. The safe house was an unassuming farmhouse set back from the coast, surrounded by enough land to provide clear sight lines and early warning of approach. Inside, however, it was a state-of-the-art command center with encrypted communications, weapons caches, and tactical planning facilities. Alexandria moved through the space with growing unease. Everything was too perfect, too convenient. Bishop's contingency had been activated, yet resources were flowing as if the normal chain of command remained intact. That didn't track with a system-wide compromise. When did Bishop disappear exactly? Alexandria asked as she reviewed the intelligence materials. 72 hours ago, Reyes supplied. She was scheduled to meet an asset in Caracas, high-level source within the Vesper network. The meeting was black, no backup, no surveillance, complete deniability. And yet you found out she was missing almost immediately, Alexandria observed. For a black meeting, that's surprisingly quick. Sullivan and Reyes exchanged glances. She had a dead man switch, Sullivan explained. If she didn't check in every 6 hours, it would automatically alert certain individuals, including me. Alexandria processed this. That's not standard protocol. Bishop hadn't been following standard protocol for months, Reyes said. She'd been increasingly paranoid, compartmentalizing information, setting up independent verification systems. Because she suspected a mole, Alexandria confirmed, pieces beginning to align in her mind. What was she investigating that spooked her so badly? Sullivan looked uncomfortable for the first time. Operation Blackfish. Alexandria went still. Operation Blackfish had been her mission 7 years ago. The deep cover infiltration of the Vesper network that had gone catastrophically wrong when her cover was blown. The mission that had left her team dead and forced her to disappear. Blackfish was shut down after my team was compromised, she said carefully. Officially, yes, Sullivan agreed. But Bishop never believed it was a coincidence that your cover was blown exactly when you were closest to identifying the Vesper leadership. She kept digging off the books, and what did she find? Alexandria asked, though she was beginning to see the shape of it now. Reyes handed her a secure file. Evidence that someone within our own organization gave you up. Someone who had access to your real identity, your mission parameters, your dead drops. Alexandria opened the file and felt the floor drop from beneath her. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Financial transactions, travel records, communications. Metadata, all pointing to a disturbing conclusion. Her team hadn't been compromised by a security breach or operational mistake. They had been deliberately sacrificed. Who? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Sullivan met her gaze. That's what Bishop was about to discover when she was taken. Alexandria closed the file, her mind racing. So to summarize, Bishop continued my investigation in secret, was close to identifying who betrayed my team 7 years ago, and that same person likely had her captured to prevent exposure. That's our assessment, Sullivan confirmed. And now you want me to rescue Bishop from a terrorist organization I haven't had contact with in 7 years, without knowing who within our own ranks might be working against us. Alexandria's tone made it clear how suicidal she found this plan. Not quite, Reyes interjected. Bishop's final message wasn't asking us to rescue her. It was instructing us to bring you the information she'd gathered so you could finish what she started. Alexandria's eyes narrowed. Finish what exactly? Identifying and eliminating the mole, then dismantling the Vesper network once and for all, Sullivan said simply. Bishop believed the two were connected, that whoever betrayed your team is highly placed within Vesper's command structure. The implications were staggering. If Bishop was right, it meant the betrayal went beyond sacrificing a single team. It meant someone had been working against American interests from within for years, possibly decades. The coordinates in my message, Alexandria said. What's there? We don't know, Sullivan admitted. Bishop's final insurance policy, something she didn't trust even to us. Alexandria studied the 12 operators who waited silently for her decision. If Bishop was right, one of these men could be working for the enemy, or Sullivan, or Reyes, or all of them. Trust had never been more dangerous or more necessary. I'll need 3 things, she said finally. First, complete operational autonomy. I work my way, use my methods, answer to no one. Second, access to all of Bishop's files, not just what she prepared for this contingency, but everything she's touched for the past 7 years. And third, she paused, her gaze sweeping the room. One, choose my own team from among these men. The rest stay here and coordinate logistics only. Sullivan nodded slowly. Done, but time is critical. The video included a deadline. We have 48 hours before they execute Bishop publicly. Alexandria smiled thinly. Then we'd better get started. As the storm intensified outside, lashing the farmhouse with wind and rain, Alexandria began the process of selecting her team and planning an operation that would either save Bishop and expose a traitor at the heart of American intelligence or get them all killed in the attempt. The woman who had spent 7 years baking blueberry muffins and pouring coffee was gone. In her place stood Kingfisher, the operative who had once been whispered about in terrorist-safe houses from Kabul to Caracas, the ghost who infiltrated the most secure cells, who vanished without a trace, who never failed a mission until her final, catastrophic assignment. Now, after 7 years of hiding, Kingfisher was hunting again, and this time, failure wasn't an option. Alexandria spent 3 hours reviewing Bishop's files, absorbing 7 years of intelligence with the focused intensity that had once been her trademark. The 12 operators maintained a respectful distance, recognizing the return of a legend even if they'd never worked with her directly. Their body language told her everything. They'd heard the stories, the whispered myths about Kingfisher, the operative who could become anyone, infiltrate anywhere. I need 4, she announced finally, looking up from the tablet. Her eyes settled on specific operators with cold precision. Reyes for tactical command, Jackson for communications, Diaz for medical, Chun for sniper support. The 4 men stepped forward while the others betrayed no disappointment. This was how special operations worked. Mission requirements dictated team composition, not ego or preference. The rest of you will coordinate our extraction and run interference with headquarters, Alexandria continued. Sullivan, I need you to be our firewall. No communication goes beyond this team without your direct approval. Sullivan nodded, understanding perfectly. If there was a mole in the system, operational security would be paramount. Alexandria turned to her chosen four. We deploy in 60 minutes. Gear for urban infiltration, possible maritime extraction. Pack for 3 days maximum. As the team prepared, Alexandria withdrew to examine the contents of Bishop's secure server more thoroughly. What she found confirmed her growing suspicions. Bishop had been systematically investigating Operation Blackfish for years, gathering fragments of evidence pointing to a high-level betrayal. Financial records showing unexplained payments to offshore accounts. Travel logs placing key personnel in suspicious locations. Communications metadata revealing patterns that couldn't be coincidental. Most disturbing were the personnel files. Bishop had flagged 6 senior intelligence officials with access to Blackfish had died in the past 3 years. Car accidents, home invasions, apparent suicides. All ruled as unrelated tragedies, but the statistical improbability was glaring. When viewed together, someone was eliminating loose ends. A soft knock interrupted her analysis. Reyes stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Team's ready. But there's something you should know. Alexandria waited, saying nothing. Bishop suspected. Someone on her personal security team, Reyes said quietly. That's why she was running the Caracas meeting black. She told me the day before she disappeared. And yet you're still here, Alexandria observed. Why would she keep you close if she suspected her own security detail? Reyes met her gaze unflinchingly. Because I'm not on her security detail. I was brought in 6 months ago specifically to help investigate the Blackfish betrayal. I never had access to her operational plans until after she activated the contingency. Alexandria studied him, looking for tells of deception and finding none. Either Reyes was telling the truth, or he was an exceptional liar. In her experience, the latter was far more common in their line of work. Why tell me this now? She asked. Because you need to know that Bishop didn't trust anyone completely, not even me. Whatever's at those coordinates, she meant it only for you. Alexandria nodded once, accepting the information without confirming whether it changed her assessment. Of Reyes, trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, but operational necessity required working with the team she had. Wheels up in 30, she said, dismissing him. Once alone, Alexandria accessed a hidden partition on the tablet Bishop had prepared. For her, the encryption was complex, requiring biometric authentication plus a passphrase only Alexandria would know, Tennyson's Shore. A reference to their first mission together when Bishop had quoted Tennyson while they waited for extraction on a bloody beach in Somalia. The partition contained a single video file, Bishop recording herself in what appeared to be a hotel room. The timestamp showed it was created just hours before her disappearance. Kingfisher, Bishop began, her face showing the lines and weathering of 7 hard years since Alexandria had last seen her. If you're watching this, I've been compromised and Ghost Protocol is active. First, I need to apologize. Sending you into deep cover with Vesper was my call. The mission failure wasn't your fault. You were betrayed by someone inside our organization. Bishop paused, glancing away briefly before continuing with renewed intensity. I've spent 7 years trying to identify who sold you out. The conspiracy goes deeper than I imagined. It's not just one mole. It's an entire shadow network within our intelligence community. People placed in key positions over decades, working to advance Vesper's agenda from inside our own government. Alexandria felt cold certainty settling in her stomach. This wasn't just about a betrayed operation or a captured officer. This was potentially the largest intelligence breach in American history. The coordinates I've sent lead to a dead drop in Quebec. It contains everything I've gathered, names, dates, evidence that would stand up in court. I couldn't risk storing it digitally, even with encryption. Too many eyes, too many backdoors. Bishop leaned closer to the camera, her voice dropping. Alexandria, I don't expect to survive this. My disappearance is a calculated move to activate the contingency and get this information to you. You're the only one completely off the grid, the only one they can't track or compromise." Bishop's expression hardened. "Find the traitors. Burn them down. And remember what I taught you. In our world, mercy is a luxury we can't afford." The video ended, leaving Alexandria staring at a blank screen, Bishop's final directive echoing in her mind. The mission parameters were now clear. Retrieve the dead drop in Quebec, identify the traitors, and dismantle the infiltration of American intelligence. Rescuing Bishop wasn't the primary objective. Bishop herself had made that clear. Alexandria closed the tablet, her decision made. She would follow Bishop's final orders, but with one modification. She would retrieve the evidence and identify the traitors, but she would also find Bishop. Not because Bishop expected it, but because Alexandria refused to abandon the woman who had given her a second chance after everyone else had written her off as too damaged, too volatile, too broken for field work. Some debts couldn't be left unpaid. The team departed the safe house at dusk, traveling in two nondescript SUVs with diplomatic plates, anonymous, enough to avoid attention, but with enough official backing to deter casual interference. Alexandria rode with Reyes, using the time to assess him more thoroughly. As Bishop's second, he would know operational details that could prove critical or dangerous if his loyalty was compromised. "Tell me about the asset Bishop was meeting in Caracas," she said as they crossed into New Hampshire, heading north toward the Canadian border. Reyes kept his eyes on the road. Codename Mockingbird, deep cover in Vesper for 3 years. Provided intelligence on movement of funds, operational planning, personnel changes. Originally Bishop's asset, later handed off to a handler named Curtis. And now Bishop was meeting him directly again, Alexandria noted. Why? Mockingbird claimed to have identified the American working with Vesper's leadership. Insisted on giving the information only to Bishop personally. Alexandria absorbed this. Did Mockingbird provide a name? No, just said it was someone with Olympus clearance. Alexandria felt her blood chill. Olympus clearance was reserved for the highest level of intelligence operations, the kind of access only a dozen people in the entire government possessed, including Sullivan. "Has Mockingbird made contact since Bishop's capture?" she asked. Reyes shook his head. "Nothing. Could be maintaining cover, could be compromised alongside Bishop, or could have been the trap." Alexandria finished the thought. They drove in silence for several miles before Reyes spoke again. "The men talk about you, Kingfisher, the operative who infiltrated Vesper deeper than anyone before or since. Some say you lived with their leader for months, without blowing your cover." Alexandria's expression remained neutral. Operational details from Blackfish remain classified. "Of course," Reyes nodded. "But if those rumors are true, you might be walking back into a situation where people recognize you. 7 years and extensive facial reconstruction make that unlikely," Alexandria replied coolly, touching the scar along her jawline. "The woman who infiltrated Vesper no longer exists physically." What she didn't add was that her cover within Vesper had been so deep that only 3 people had ever seen her face, and 2 of them were dead. The third was Vesper's leader, a man known only as Helix, whose identity remained unknown even to intelligence agencies. The man she had been sent to kill 7 years ago. The man who had captured her, tortured her for 3 days, and then inexplicably released her with a message. "Tell your handlers that the next operative they send dies slowly. You live only because we had an agreement once." An agreement Alexandria had never reported, never documented, never acknowledged even to herself in the years since. Some secrets were too dangerous to exist outside your own mind. As they approached the Canadian border, Alexandria surveyed the crossing point. Standard procedure would be to use their diplomatic credentials for a smooth passage. But standard procedure created digital records. If there were indeed moles with Olympus clearance, those records could be accessed. Pull over at the next rest. Stop, she instructed Reyes. 5 minutes later, their two-vehicle convoy sat in a deserted scenic overlook. Alexandria addressed the team concisely. Change of plans. We're not using the main crossing. Jackson, contact the backup team at the safe house. Have them create a digital trail showing our vehicles crossing at the main checkpoint 1 hour from now. Chun, you're on overwatch. Diaz, prep medical supplies for potential cold weather exposure. Reyes studied her. You're talking about crossing. Off-grid. Alexandria nodded. There's a logging road 3 miles east that crosses the border. Minimal security, used primarily by local landowners. That's technically illegal entry, Reyes pointed out. Technically, none of us exists on this operation, Alexandria countered. We're ghosts until we complete the mission. The team adjusted. Without further question, transferring essential gear to backpacks and concealing weapons beneath civilian outerwear. 30 minutes later, they abandoned the vehicles at a prearranged location where Sullivan's backup team would retrieve them. Continuing on foot through dense forest toward the unmarked border. The storm that had been building all day finally broke as they hiked, bringing driving rain that reduced visibility but also minimized the chance of detection. Alexandria moved through the wilderness with the same efficiency she had once shown. Navigating terrorist strongholds, her body remembering skills her diner owner persona had kept dormant. They crossed into Canada shortly before midnight, navigating by GPS to a cache Bishop had established years earlier, a weather-beaten hunting cabin that contained emergency supplies, weapons, and a battered but functional Land Rover with Canadian plates. Bishop's contingency planning was thorough, Reyes observed as they loaded gear into the vehicle. Bishop never left anything to chance, Alexandria replied. Especially exit strategies. As Diaz took the wheel, Alexandria checked the secure tablet for updates. The fake digital trail had been successfully planted. Anyone monitoring border crossings would believe they had entered Canada through official channels. A small advantage, but potentially crucial if Sullivan's suspicions about high-level infiltration were correct. The coordinates for Bishop's dead drop led to a remote area outside Quebec City, a 6-hour drive through increasingly deteriorating weather. Alexandria used the time to review what they knew about Bishop's movements before her disappearance and to assess her team more carefully. Chun, the sniper, maintained his position by the window, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. His personnel file indicated over 15 years of special operations experience, with confirmed kills in 6 countries. His precision would be essential if they encountered resistance at the dead drop. Diaz drove with calm competence, his medical background evident in how he regularly checked on the team's condition, offering water and energy bars without being asked. His file showed distinguished service as a combat medic before being recruited for covert operations. Jackson handled communications with silent efficiency, maintaining secure links to Sullivan's team while monitoring emergency channels. His technical expertise would be their lifeline if things went sideways. And Reyes, Bishop's second, the man who knew more about her recent operations than anyone else alive. Alexandria watched him carefully, looking for inconsistencies or signs of deception. So far, he had performed exactly as expected of a top-tier operative. Perhaps too perfectly. Tell me about the last time you saw Bishop, Alexandria said suddenly, directing the question at Reyes. If he was surprised by the abrupt interrogation, he didn't show it. 3 days ago, 0600 hours. She was prepping for the Caracas meeting. In her office at Langley. Reviewed the Mockingbird file, secured her weapon, standard procedure for field deployment. Her mood? Focused, determined. Reyes paused. And concerned. She'd received some information the night before that had her on edge. What information? She didn't share specifics. Just said the board was moving faster than anticipated and pieces were being sacrificed. Alexandria nodded slightly. Bishop had always been fond of chess metaphors. Did she say anything else? Anything personal or out of the ordinary? Reyes considered the question. She looked at a photograph on her desk for a long time. Her original team from when she ran field operations. You were in it. Alexandria felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. Nostalgia, perhaps, or regret for the path not taken. The photograph Reyes mentioned would have been from nearly 15 years ago, when Bishop had commanded Kingfisher Squad, the elite infiltration unit that had eventually evolved into the deep cover program that sent Alexandria into Vesper. She said something odd, Reyes continued. She said, Kingfisher was right about Icarus. Does that mean anything to you? Alexandria's face revealed nothing, but internally, alarm sounded. Icarus had been the code name for a suspected mole. In counter-terrorism operations, a decade earlier, an investigation that had been abruptly shut down by order of the Director of National Intelligence himself. Alexandria had been the one to identify the inconsistencies that pointed to Icarus's existence, but Bishop had been ordered to drop the investigation. Just an old operation, Alexandria said dismissively, but her mind was racing with implications. If Bishop had connected Icarus to the current infiltration, it meant the conspiracy went back at least 10 years and reached the highest levels of intelligence leadership. The storm intensified as they approached Quebec City, transforming from heavy rain to driving sleet that coated the roads in treacherous ice. Diaz navigated the hazardous conditions with practiced skill, but their progress slowed considerably. ETA to the coordinates? Alexandria asked. 2 hours in these conditions, Jackson replied, studying the navigation system. The location appears to be an old church about 20 kilometers outside the city. Alexandria checked the time, 0430 hours. Dawn would break around 0700, giving them limited darkness for the retrieval operation. Not ideal, but workable. We'll establish a perimeter when we arrive, she decided. Chun on overwatch, Jackson monitoring communications for any unusual activity. Diaz and Reyes with me for the actual retrieval. The team acknowledged the plan with professional efficiency. As they continued through the storm, Alexandria allowed herself a moment of reflection. 7 years ago, she had walked away from this life, the constant vigilance, the split-second decisions with life or death consequences, the web of lies and half-truths that made up the world of covert operations. For 7 years, she had baked bread instead of planting explosives, memorized regular customers' orders instead of enemy patrol patterns, created a life built on simple human connections rather than elaborate deceptions. She had found a kind of peace in Harborview that had eluded her through years of undercover work. And now, in a matter of hours, she had stepped back into the shadow world as if she had never left. The skills remained razor-sharp, the instinct still honed to lethal precision. Olivia Clarke might have found redemption in feeding a small coastal town, but Alexandria Mercer, Kingfisher, had been forged for this darkness. The question that haunted her as they drove through the Canadian wilderness was whether she could return to the light once this mission was complete, or if, like Bishop, she would be consumed by the shadows until nothing else remained. The old church appeared through the sleet shortly after 0600 hours, a stone structure dating from the colonial era, partially reclaimed by the surrounding forest. Its bell tower remained intact, providing an ideal position for Chun to establish overwatch. They parked the Land Rover half a kilometer away, approaching the final distance on foot through dense woods. Despite the weather and difficult terrain, the team moved with synchronized precision, maintaining formation and security protocols without need for verbal communication. Alexandria felt the familiar calm settle over her, the operational focus that had once made her the most effective deep-cover operative in the program. Her senses heightened, cataloging every sound, every movement, every potential threat or advantage in their surroundings. As they reached the perimeter of the church grounds, Alexandria signaled for the team to hold position while she conducted initial reconnaissance. The building appeared abandoned, with no signs of recent activity. Aside from animal tracks in the fresh snow, no surveillance equipment visible, no disturbances in the natural accumulation of ice on the stone walls. She rejoined the team, issuing quiet instructions. Chun, establish position in the bell tower. Diaz, medical kit ready and perimeter security. East, Jackson, communications monitoring and perimeter west. Ray is with me for the retrieval. Within minutes, Chun had disappeared into the structure, moving with the ghost-like silence of a veteran sniper. Diaz and Jackson took their assigned positions, establishing a security cordon around the church. Alexandria and Reyes approached. The main entrance, a heavy wooden door partially rotted from years of exposure. It opened with a protesting groan that seemed thunderous in the pre-dawn stillness. The interior was a single open space, with rows of decaying pews facing an altar area long stripped of religious iconography. Weak light filtered through stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the stone floor. Bishop's coordinates. Point specifically to the altar area, Rhea said, consulting the secure tablet. Alexandria nodded, but her attention had already focused on the stone floor near the altar. Years of operational experience had taught her to recognize the subtle signs of disturbance, minute scratches in the ancient stone, almost invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. There, she said, moving toward a particular flagstone that appeared no different from those surrounding it. Kneeling, she pressed specific points on the stone in a pattern that matched Bishop's personal authentication code. The stone shifted slightly, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside was a small, waterproof case secured with a biometric lock. Alexandria pressed her thumb to the scanner, and the case opened with a soft click. It contained a single item, an old-fashioned data storage device, a micro SD card sealed in protective casing. No digital transmission capability, no wireless vulnerability. Old-school tradecraft, impossible to hack remotely. Is that it? Reyes asked, his tone betraying slight disappointment at the unimpressive item. Alexandria pocketed the device without comment. Bishop would have chosen this method deliberately. Information too sensitive to risk any digital exposure until absolutely necessary. As they secured the hidden compartment and prepared to exit, Chun's voice came through their communications. System, tense and urgent. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north. 3 SUVs, tactical deployment pattern. Armed personnel. Alexandria and Reyes exchanged glances. The dead drop was supposed to be known only to Bishop, and now Alexandria. No one should have been able to track them here, especially after their off-grid border crossing. How did they find us? Reyes asked, drawing his weapon. Alexandria's mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. A tracking device on there. Equipment? Unlikely. They had swept everything before departing the safe house. A mole among Sullivan's backup team? Possible, but they had maintained communication discipline. Or someone on her current team had betrayed their position. Defensive positions, Alexandria commanded through the comm system. Prepare for hostile engagement. As dawn broke over the old church, Kingfisher readied herself for battle once more. The peaceful life of Olivia Clarke felt increasingly distant, like a dream fading in the harsh light of morning. Whatever was on the storage device in her pocket had cost Bishop her freedom and possibly her life. Alexandria was determined it wouldn't be in vain. Alexandria assessed their tactical situation with the cold efficiency that had once made her legendary. The church offered limited defensive options, Stone walls provided cover but restricted movement, while the single main entrance created a potential bottleneck. The bell tower gave Chun an elevated firing position, but also made him a priority target once discovered. "Status report," she commanded through the comm system. "3 vehicles stopped 200 meters out," Chun replied from his perch. 12 individuals. Deploying in tactical formation. Professional movement, military-grade weapons, not local law enforcement. Communications? Alexandria asked Jackson. "No unusual signals or transmissions in the area. They're running silent." Alexandria made her decision instantly. "We're compromised. Activate contingency echo." The team responded without hesitation, shifting to predetermined evacuation protocols. Echo meant abandoning standard extraction plans in favor of immediate separation and independent exfiltration, a last resort option designed for situations where team integrity could no longer be trusted. Chun, maintain overwatch and covering. Fire. Jackson Diaz, fall back to secondary extraction point. Reyes with me. Alexandria issued the commands while moving toward a narrow side door, half hidden behind the remains of a confessional booth. As the team separated, Alexandria allowed herself exactly 3 seconds to consider which of them might have betrayed their position. No evidence pointed conclusively at any team member, but the timing was too precise to be coincidence. Someone knew exactly where they would be. The side door opened to a small, overgrown cemetery behind the church. Alexandria led Reyes through crumbling headstones toward the tree line 30 meters away, using the pre-dawn shadows for concealment. Behind them, the first shots rang out as Chun engaged the approaching hostiles. "Chun," Alexandria spoke into. Her status of hostiles, professional operators. Coordinated approach. 2-man teams, standard pincer movement. Chun's voice remained calm despite the gunfire audible in the background. "They're not Canadian or local. American equipment, American tactics." Alexandria processed this information as she and Reyes reached the forest edge. American tactics meant either U.S. forces operating extra-legally on foreign soil or mercenaries. Trained in American methods, neither option was reassuring. "Can you delay them?" she asked Chun. "Affirmative. I can hold this position for approximately 8 minutes before they flank the tower." "Do it. Then execute your echo extraction." Alexandria switched channels. "Jackson Diaz status?" "Moving to secondary extraction point," Jackson confirmed. "No pursuit detected." Alexandria led Reyes deeper into the forest, following a predetermined route that would take them to an emergency cache Bishop had established 5 kilometers north. They moved silently through the underbrush, their footprints quickly covered by the still falling snow. "You think one of our team sold us out?" Reyes said after they had put sufficient distance between themselves and the church. "Not a question, but an observation. The alternative is that someone with Olympus clearance tracked us despite our precautions," Alexandria replied. "Either possibility indicates the infiltration is more extensive than we realized." Reyes nodded. Grimly, "If it's someone on the team, my money's on Jackson. He had control of all communications." "Or Chen, who had line of sight to signal approaching forces," Alexandria countered. "Or Diaz, who could have planted a tracker during medical checks. Or you, who knew our exact destination." Reyes accepted this assessment with a slight inclination of his head. "Fair point. Trust is a luxury we can't afford right now." They continued in silence for several minutes, the sounds of gunfire at the church growing fainter behind them. Alexandria maintained a punishing pace through the difficult terrain, testing Reyes's physical capabilities while analyzing his responses for any sign of duplicity. "Bishop trusted you," she said suddenly, watching his reaction closely. "Bishop trusted the system she built, not individuals," Reyes replied without breaking stride. "She compartmentalized information, created redundant verification protocols, established contingencies that activated independently. She designed an operation that would succeed even if every person involved was compromised. Alexandria nodded. Slightly. The answer aligned with Bishop's methodology: trust systems and protocols over people, because people could be compromised, coerced, or converted. Including you, she observed. Including me, Reyes confirmed. The full operational details were kept from all of us. I didn't know about the Quebec dead drop until you unlocked Bishop's tablet. They reached a small clearing where a frozen stream cut through the forest. Alexandria paused, checking their position against mental maps of the area. We need to split up, she decided. Echo protocol requires individual exfiltration. Reyes studied her face. You don't trust me to continue. With you, I don't trust anyone right now, Alexandria corrected him. Bishop's protocol was clear: if compromised, team members separate and proceed to independent extraction points. What she didn't say was that she had no intention of following standard extraction protocols. The data storage device in her pocket was too valuable. The information it contained too sensitive to risk returning to official channels that might be compromised. Reyes seemed to read her intention anyway. You're going off-grid completely. Alexandria neither confirmed nor denied this assessment. Your extraction point is the safe house in Portland. Report to Sullivan directly, no intermediaries. And you will complete Bishop's mission. Reyes hesitated, then reached into his jacket and removed a small metal case. Bishop gave me this before she left for Caracas. Said if things went sideways, I should give it to Kingfisher and no one else. Alexandria accepted the case cautiously. It contained a single key with no identifying markings and a slip of paper with a 10-digit number written in Bishop's distinctive handwriting. A safety deposit box, Reyes explained. In Montreal, Bishop established it under a cover identity 5 years ago. Alexandria pocketed the key without comment. Good luck, Kingfisher, Reyes said, his expression unreadable. For what it's worth, I believe in what Bishop was trying to do. The system is compromised, but it's still worth saving. It's not the system I'm trying to save, Alexandria replied. It's the people who were betrayed by it. They parted ways at the frozen stream, Reyes heading east toward the secondary extraction route, while Alexandria continued north. Once certain she was alone, she deliberately changed course, moving northwest instead, away from any predetermined extraction points and toward Montreal. The gunfire from the church had stopped completely. Either Chun had neutralized the threat, which seemed unlikely given the opposing numbers, or he had been forced to withdraw. Or worse, Alexandria pushed the thought aside, focusing on immediate survival and mission objectives. She maintained a grueling pace through the morning, covering nearly 15 kilometers of difficult terrain before the storm finally began to abate. As weak winter sunlight broke through the clouds, she reached another of Bishop's emergency caches, this one disguised as an abandoned trapper's cabin deep in the wilderness. The cache contained everything needed for a covert identity transition: clothing, cash, documentation, basic weapons, and a satellite phone with encryption capabilities beyond even military-grade systems. Bishop's contingency planning remained impeccable. Alexandria used the satellite phone to send a predetermined signal, a simple burst transmission that would reach Sullivan's secure server and indicate she had survived the initial ambush. No location data, no mission status, just proof of life. Then she changed into civilian clothing, appropriate for urban environments, secured the data storage device and safety deposit box key in a specially designed hidden pocket, and destroyed all evidence of her tactical gear and equipment. Within 30 minutes, Kingfisher had disappeared, replaced by Marie Doucette, a French-Canadian business consultant whose documentation would withstand all but the most rigorous inspection. She hiked another 5 kilometers to a rural highway, where she flagged down a logging truck heading toward Montreal. The driver, a weathered man in his 60s, who asked no questions about what a woman was doing alone in the wilderness, dropped her at a train station in a small town 60 kilometers from the city. By nightfall, Alexandria had reached Montreal and checked into a modest hotel near the financial district under her Marie Doucette identity. In her room, she finally allowed herself to examine the data storage device recovered from the church. The micro SD card was unusable in standard readers, a customized format that required specialized equipment to access. Another security measure from Bishop, ensuring the information couldn't be casually compromised. Tomorrow she would visit the safety deposit box Reyes had directed her to. If Bishop's pattern held, it would contain the necessary equipment to read the storage device. Alexandria allowed herself 4 hours of sleep, the disciplined rest of a field operative rather than true relaxation. Her mind continued processing possibilities even as her body recovered, analyzing potential threats and plotting contingencies. Morning brought clear skies and bitter cold to Montreal. Alexandria moved through the awakening city with the confident stride of a business professional, stopping at a cafe for breakfast while conducting subtle counter-surveillance. No indication of pursuit so far, but that meant little in a city of nearly 2 million people. The bank that held Bishop's safety deposit box was a mid-sized institution catering to professionals and small businesses, neither so exclusive as to draw attention, nor so casual with security as to risk compromise. Alexandria presented her credentials as Marie Doucette along with the key and 10-digit access code, following a bank employee to the vault area. Left alone with the safety deposit box, she examined its contents methodically. As expected, it contained a specialized reader for the storage device, along with additional identity documents, emergency cash in multiple currencies, and a small, elegant handgun with custom modifications, Bishop's personal backup weapon, recognizable by the distinctive grip pattern. Most significant was a sealed envelope addressed simply, Kingfisher. Alexandria opened it carefully, revealing a handwritten letter in Bishop's precise script, analog communication impossible to intercept electronically. Alexandria, if you're reading this, I've been compromised and Ghost Protocol is active. The storage device contains everything I've discovered about the infiltration: names, dates, connections, evidence. The conspiracy is broader and deeper than either of us imagined. The entity we identified as Vesper is merely the external face of an organization that has operatives throughout our government and intelligence services. They call themselves the Helix Directive, a reference to their structure. Cut off one strand and others remain functional. What began as Operation Blackfish was never about infiltrating a terrorist network. It was about exposing a decades-long operation to influence American intelligence from within. Your mission 7 years ago came too close to exposing them, which is why you were betrayed. The key players are identified in the files, but the primary architect, the one who orchestrated your team's compromise, operates under the codename Daedalus. His true identity is contained in the encrypted section of the data storage, accessible only through the reader I provided. Alexandria, I don't expect to survive this operation. My capture was calculated, a necessary sacrifice to activate Ghost Protocol and place this information in your hands. You are the only operative completely outside the system, unknown to current leadership, and with the necessary skills to finish what we started. Trust no one within the organization. Sullivan was my friend for 30 years, but even he doesn't know the full scope of what I've discovered. Reyes I recruited personally, but proximity is no guarantee of loyalty. Complete the mission. Expose the Helix Directive. And remember what I taught you. Sometimes surviving is the only victory we get. With respect and faith, Elena Bishop, Alexandria. Read the letter twice, committing its contents to memory before destroying it completely. The implications were staggering. Not just a mole or a small network of compromised agents, but a systematic infiltration reaching the highest levels of intelligence leadership. Using the specialized reader, she accessed the data storage device. It contained exactly what Bishop had promised: comprehensive documentation of the Helix Directive's operations, spanning decades. Financial records showing money movement through shell companies and offshore accounts. Personnel files identifying suspected operatives in key positions throughout government agencies. Operational timelines connecting seemingly unrelated events into a pattern of deliberate manipulation of American intelligence priorities. And most damning of all, evidence identifying the figure known as Daedalus, the architect of the infiltration and the person who had personally ordered the compromise of Alexandria's team 7 years ago. The face staring back from the screen was instantly recognizable: Director James Sullivan. Alexandria sat perfectly still, the shock reverberating through her like a physical blow. Sullivan, Bishop's oldest friend and ally. The man who had recruited Alexandria personally for Kingfisher Squad 15 years ago. The man who claimed terminal cancer had made him immune to compromise. The man who had organized the current mission to rescue Bishop and recover her evidence. The pieces aligned with devastating clarity. Sullivan hadn't sent her to recover Bishop's evidence. He had sent her to eliminate the final loose end in Bishop's investigation. The team of operators weren't backup. They were cleaners tasked with ensuring the evidence never reached the proper authorities. Alexandria methodically copied the critical data to a secure backup she could transport separately, then replaced everything in the safety deposit box except the specialized reader and Bishop's gun. She would need both for what came next. As she left the bank, HER satellite phone vibrated with an incoming transmission, a predetermined emergency signal from Sullivan's secure server. The message was brief and coded. Wildfire protocol initiated. All assets return to base immediately. Bishop recovered. Repeat, Bishop recovered. Alexandria analyzed the message's implications. Wildfire protocol was an all-hands recall, used only in the most extreme circumstances. Claiming Bishop had been recovered was either true, which seemed unlikely given the timelines involved, or a lure to draw Alexandria back into Sullivan's reach. She needed independent verification before proceeding. Using public transportation and careful counter-surveillance techniques, Alexandria made her way to a cybercafe in a busy commercial district. From a terminal in the back corner, with clear sight lines to all entrances, she accessed one of Bishop's emergency communication channels, a seemingly innocuous travel blog that contained coded messages in the image metadata. The latest post, dated that morning, contained a single message: Mockingbird sings at midnight. Valkyrie protocol active. Alexandria felt a surge of grim satisfaction. Bishop was alive and communicating through emergency channels. Mockingbird, her asset in Caracas, remained operational. And most importantly, Valkyrie protocol had been activated. Valkyrie was Bishop's ultimate contingency, the public release of all evidence if certain conditions weren't met. It meant Bishop had established deadlines for the exposure of the Helix Directive, with automated systems that would send the evidence to journalists, oversight committees, and foreign intelligence partners if she didn't personally prevent it. Bishop was using herself as leverage against her captors. The final piece of the message, midnight, wasn't a time but a location. An emergency rendezvous point Bishop had established in Montreal years earlier, known only to her closest operatives. Alexandria checked her watch. 9 hours until the meeting. She spent those hours meticulously preparing, using resources from Bishop's emergency caches to establish surveillance around the rendezvous location, an abandoned factory in Montreal's old industrial district. By sunset, she had identified 3 separate surveillance teams watching the factory, one clearly Sullivan's operators based on their equipment and tactics, another that appeared to be Canadian intelligence, possibly alerted by the unusual activity. and a third group whose affiliation remained unclear, but whose professionalism suggested Vesper operatives. Everyone was converging on the midnight meeting, creating a volatile tactical situation with multiple armed groups operating independently. Alexandria analyzed her options. Direct confrontation was suicide against these odds. Attempting to extract Bishop, if she was indeed present, would be nearly impossible through 3 layers of hostile surveillance. Securing the evidence and completing the mission had to remain the priority. But Alexandria had not survived years of deep cover operations without learning how to create opportunities from chaos. As darkness fell over Montreal, she put her plan into motion. Using remote triggers planted during her earlier reconnaissance, she activated small diversionary devices at strategic locations around the industrial complex, not explosives, but precisely timed distractions designed to create confusion without casualties. The first surveillance team, Sullivan's operators, immediately responded to the distractions, their disciplined reaction revealing their positions to Alexandria's practiced eye. The Canadian team maintained their observation posts, showing the patience of intelligence rather than tactical operators. The third group, presumed Vesper, adjusted slightly but remained focused on the factory itself. At precisely 23:45, Alexandria activated her final diversion, a carefully orchestrated series of security alarms and power fluctuations across multiple buildings in the area. In the resulting confusion, she moved silently through the complex, using the routes she had mapped earlier to avoid all 3 surveillance teams. She reached the factory's north entrance unseen, slipping inside through a maintenance door whose electronic lock had been disabled by the power fluctuations. The interior was dark and cavernous, the machinery long removed but the massive structural supports creating a labyrinth of shadows and concealment. Alexandria moved through this space with practiced silence, her senses heightened to detect any presence. Bishop's gun, a modified Sig Sauer with an integrated suppressor, remained holstered but accessible. At the center of the factory floor, a single figure waited in shadow, too small to be Sullivan, too still to be an inexperienced operative. "Bishop," Alexandria said softly, maintaining her position rather than approaching. The figure stepped forward slightly, revealing a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and the poised confidence that had made Elena Bishop legendary in intelligence circles. Her face showed evidence of recent mistreatment, a healing cut above her right eye, fading bruises along her jawline, but her eyes remained sharp and evaluating. "Kingfisher," Bishop acknowledged. "You got my message." "And your evidence," Alexandria confirmed. "Sullivan is Daedalus." Bishop nodded once. 30 years of friendship, and he was working against us the entire time. The perfect deep cover. "Operative, you've been compromised," Alexandria observed. "This meeting is under surveillance by at least 3 different teams." "I'm aware," Bishop replied calmly. "I negotiated my release specifically to create this opportunity." Alexandria understood immediately. "You're bait. The meeting isn't about extraction. It's about exposing all the players simultaneously." "Precisely. Sullivan believes I'm here to turn myself in, having realized the futility of resistance. Vesper believes I'm here to betray my government in exchange for protection. Canadian intelligence is here because unusual electronic communications triggered their national security protocols. And you're actually here to spring the trap," Alexandria concluded. "With me as your insurance policy." Bishop smiled thinly. "Some lessons take, I see. Always have a contingency for your contingency." Alexandria assessed the tactical situation anew. "The evidence isn't secure yet. If Sullivan realizes you've already passed it to me, he won't survive the night." Bishop finished. "The Helix Directive protects itself by eliminating compromised assets, regardless of their importance. Sullivan knows too much to be allowed to live once his cover is blown." Then we need to extract him, Alexandria said, surprising herself. With the conclusion, he's the only one who can testify to the full extent of the infiltration. Bishop studied her former protege with new appreciation. Revenge isn't your priority. Justice is, Alexandria replied simply, for my team. For all the operatives betrayed over the years. Sullivan deserves to face that justice formally, not escape it through death. A slow smile spread across Bishop's face, the expression of a teacher whose student had surpassed expectations. In that case, Kingfisher, I believe it's time for your final mission. Outside the factory, 3 separate teams of operatives prepared to converge on the meeting point, unaware that the true game was already several moves ahead of them. Sullivan's operators moved with the confidence of those who believed they controlled the situation. Vesper's team positioned for maximum tactical advantage. Canadian intelligence maintained their observation posts, waiting for clear justification to intervene on their sovereign territory. None of them realized that the hunter had become the hunted, and that Kingfisher, the operative who had once infiltrated the most dangerous terrorist network in the world, was about to turn the tables on them all. 30 seconds to 0. Hour, Bishop murmured, checking her watch. Sullivan's team will breach from the south entrance. Vesper from the east. Canadians will maintain perimeter containment, but won't engage unless weapons fire is detected. Alexandria nodded, absorbing the tactical assessment. Exfiltration route? Maintenance tunnels beneath the factory floor. Access point behind. The old foreman's office. They lead to the river, where I have a boat staged. The precision of Bishop's planning remained impeccable, even after capture and apparent compromise. Alexandria wondered briefly if she would maintain such clarity. After similar treatment, then dismissed the thought as irrelevant. Focus on the mission, not hypotheticals. Sullivan believes you'll surrender the evidence, Alexandria confirmed. And himself, Bishop added. His cancer diagnosis is real. 6 months at most. He's positioning himself as the noble sacrifice, turning himself in alongside me while ensuring the Helix directive continues without him, while actually ensuring all evidence disappears permanently, Alexandria concluded. Bishop's smile was cold. Exactly. But Sullivan doesn't know about Valkyrie protocol. In 17 hours, everything goes public unless I personally prevent it. Insurance against any double cross. Alexandria studied her former commander with new appreciation. Even captured, tortured, and apparently compromised, Bishop had maintained operational control, manipulating her captors into believing they had turned her, while actually maneuvering them into an elaborate trap. Your role is simple, Bishop continued. When Sullivan enters, I'll engage him directly. During that confrontation, you secure our exit route and prepare for extraction under fire. Primary target is Sullivan. He must be taken alive to testify against the entire network. And if Vesper engages, defensive measures only. We need Sullivan's testimony more than Vesper casualties. The factory's cavernous space fell silent as both women heard the faint sounds of approaching teams. Multiple entry points being breached simultaneously with the disciplined quiet of professional operators. Remember your training, Bishop said softly. When everything falls apart, focus on the mission objective. Nothing else matters. Alexandria moved silently toward the designated extraction point, keeping to shadows as Sullivan's team entered. From the south, 6 operators in tactical formation, weapons at ready position but not aimed. Sullivan himself followed, dressed in civilian clothes but moving with the ingrained precision of decades in covert operations. From her concealed position, Alexandria watched the confrontation unfold. "Elena," Sullivan greeted Bishop, his voice carrying in the empty space. "Thank you for seeing reason." Bishop stood her ground, hands visible at her sides. "James, terminal cancer makes a persuasive argument for setting things right before the end. Sullivan approached until he stood just meters from Bishop. "You have the evidence?" "Safe but accessible," Bishop replied. "Contingent on guarantees for my people. Your loyal operators will be protected," Sullivan assured her. Ghost protocol rescinded, their service records unblemished. Bishop's expression remained neutral. "And Alexandria?" A flicker of something, perhaps genuine regret, crossed Sullivan's face. "Kingfisher was one of our finest. Her sacrifice 7 years ago was unfortunate but necessary." "Necessary for what, James? For the Helix Directive? For Vesper?" Sullivan's tactical team shifted positions slightly at the direct mention of the organization, confirming their awareness of its significance. "For national security," Sullivan corrected. "The old paradigms were failing us, Elena. Conventional intelligence couldn't adapt to emerging threats. We needed a new approach." "By betraying your own people?" Bishop's voice remained calm, but Alexandria detected the controlled fury beneath. "By sacrificing American operatives to protect your infiltration?" Sullivan sighed heavily. "Some sacrifices are necessary in our line of work. You taught me that, Elena, back in Belgrade, when you made the call to leave Matthews behind to protect the extraction route." Bishop didn't flinch at the reference to an operation 3 decades past. Matthews knew the risks. Alexandria's team didn't know they were being betrayed by their own director. As the confrontation continued, Alexandria detected movement at the factory's east entrance, Vesper's team entering with significantly less restraint than Sullivan's operators. 6 figures in nondescript tactical gear, moving with practiced coordination that suggested former military training. Alexandria tensed, calculating trajectories and fields of fire. If Vesper engaged, the situation would deteriorate instantly, potentially eliminating their chance to secure Sullivan alive. "You always were an idealist, Elena," Sullivan was saying, his tone almost affectionate. "That's why I protected you all these years. Kept you focused on external threats while we reshaped intelligence from within." "Reshaped it into what?" Bishop demanded. "An extension of Vesper's agenda? A tool for manipulating global conflicts to profit private interests?" Sullivan's expression hardened. "You see only the surface. The Helix Directive isn't about profit, it's about control. Establishing the stabilizing influence across global flashpoints, preventing the chaos that traditional agencies actually perpetuate through their uncoordinated, competing objectives. By eliminating anyone who gets close to the truth," Bishop pressed, "like Alexandria's team." "Alexandria got too close to Helix's leadership structure," Sullivan acknowledged. "She was an exceptional operative, perhaps too exceptional. When she identified connections we couldn't allow to be exposed, containment became necessary." The admission, spoken casually, as if discussing routine operational decisions, confirmed everything Bishop had discovered. Sullivan, the man who had recruited and mentored generations of intelligence officers, had personally ordered the betrayal of Alexandria's team to protect his true allegiance. Alexandria forced herself to remain motionless despite the surge of cold fury, focus on the mission, not emotion. Sullivan needed to be taken alive, his confession recorded and preserved as evidence against the entire network. The Vesper team had paused their advance, clearly monitoring the confrontation between Sullivan and Bishop. Their tactical positioning suggested they were waiting for a specific trigger before engaging, perhaps the mention of evidence or a signal from an unseen controller. "You know I can't let you leave with that evidence, Elena," Sullivan said, his tone regretful but determined. "Too many lives at stake. Too much important work that would be destroyed by exposure." "I expected nothing less," Bishop replied. "That's why I implemented Valkyrie Protocol. In 17 hours, everything goes public unless I personally prevent it. My death or disappearance only accelerates the timeline." Sullivan's expression flickered with genuine surprise, perhaps the first authentic reaction he'd shown. "You're Bluffing. Am I? Bishop smiled thinly. You taught me contingency planning, James. Taught me to always have a failsafe that operates independent of personal survival. Did you really think I wouldn't apply that lesson to the biggest case of my career? Alexandria recognized the shift in Sullivan's demeanor instantly. The subtle tensing of shoulders, the almost imperceptible change in his stance. He was preparing to signal his team. The confrontation was about to turn kinetic. Before Sullivan could act, the factory's emergency lighting system suddenly activated, harsh industrial lamps, flooding the space with blinding illumination. Simultaneously, a voice echoed through the facility's ancient PA system. Attention all personnel. This facility is surrounded by Royal Canadian Mounted Police Tactical Response Units. Lay down your weapons and surrender immediately. The unexpected development froze all parties momentarily. Sullivan's team, the Vesper operators, even Bishop looked genuinely surprised. Only Alexandria remained in motion, using the distraction to advance silently toward her primary objective, securing Sullivan. The Canadian intelligence team had apparently decided to intervene directly rather than maintain perimeter observation. Whether they had recognized the high-value targets present or simply determined that armed foreign operatives on Canadian soil constituted sufficient threat was unclear. What mattered was the tactical advantage their intervention provided. Chaos erupted as Sullivan's team responded to the threat, establishing defensive positions while awaiting their leader's command. The Vesper team immediately began a tactical withdrawal toward their entry point, prioritizing escape over objective completion. Sullivan himself reached for Bishop, clearly intending to use her as leverage. This isn't over, Elena. The directive has contingencies you can't imagine. Alexandria moved with the fluid grace that had made her legendary, crossing the intervening space before Sullivan could secure his grip on Bishop. Her strike was precise, not to incapacitate, but to separate, breaking Sullivan's grasp while positioning herself between the two former friends. Kingfisher, Sullivan breathed, genuine shock replacing his controlled demeanor. You're alive. Surprised? Alexandria asked, maintaining tactical positioning as Bishop withdrew toward the extraction point. You should have confirmed the kill 7 years ago. Sullivan's shock transformed into calculating assessment. I always respected your abilities. That's why you were selected for Blackfish. We needed our best to infiltrate Vesper. To eliminate potential competition, Alexandria corrected. Not to protect national security. Around them, the tactical situation deteriorated rapidly. Canadian authorities were entering the facility from multiple points, their announcements continuing over the PA system. Sullivan's operators had established a defensive perimeter, preparing to extract their principal. The Vesper team had disappeared, prioritizing operational security over confrontation. You don't understand the bigger picture, Sullivan insisted, his composure returning. The intelligence community was compromised long before the Helix Directive. Competing agencies, political manipulation, short-term thinking destroying long-term security. We created something better, coordinated, strategic, above political whims. By betraying your oath, Alexandria stated flatly. By sacrificing loyal operators who trusted you. Sullivan's expression hardened. Necessary sacrifices. For a greater purpose. The world isn't as simple as the ideals they teach at the Academy, Alexandria. Sometimes building a better system requires dismantling the old one from within. We need to move, Alexandria said, ignoring his justifications. Canadian authorities are securing all exits. Our window is closing. Sullivan glanced toward his tactical team, clearly calculating odds of successful extraction through the tightening Canadian perimeter. You're suggesting we work together after everything? I'm suggesting you face justice properly, Alexandria replied. Testify about the Helix Directive, expose the entire network. Or stay here and take your chances with foreign authorities, who have no reason to keep you alive once they realize what you know. It was a calculated risk, offering Sullivan a path that appealed to his self-interest while serving their actual objective. If captured by Canadian authorities, Sullivan would likely be rendered to U.S. intelligence services, many of which remained compromised by the Helix Directive. His testimony would be silenced before it could expose the full network. Sullivan studied Alexandria's face, searching for deception and finding only cold determination. Whatever he saw there apparently convinced him. My team will create a diversion to cover our extraction, Alexandria stated. Bishop has an exit route secured. Sullivan nodded once, then spoke quietly into his communications device. His tactical team immediately adjusted their defensive positions, focusing their attention toward the main Canadian entry points. Alexandria led Sullivan toward the extraction point where Bishop waited, covering their movement as Sullivan's team engaged the Canadian authorities with suppressive fire carefully, calibrated to delay rather than inflict casualties. Professional restraint, even in retreat. This way, Bishop directed, revealing the access point to the maintenance tunnels beneath the factory floor. The tunnels lead to the river, half a kilometer east. The three intelligence veterans descended into the darkness below, Bishop leading with Sullivan in the middle and Alexandria covering their rear. The confined space of the tunnel created a tactical vulnerability that Alexandria monitored constantly, alert for any indication that Sullivan might attempt to overpower them. Your cancer diagnosis, Bishop said as they moved through the narrow passage. Is it real? 4 months with treatment, Sullivan confirmed. Perhaps 6. The doctors aren't optimistic. That explains your willingness to position yourself as the sacrificial figure, Bishop observed. The noble leader taking responsibility while preserving the organization. Sullivan's laugh held no humor, always seeing through the layers. Elena, that's why you were my best analyst, even as you became my greatest threat. Above them, the sounds of confrontation faded as they progressed away from the factory. The tunnel was cold and damp, decades of neglect evident in crumbling concrete and exposed rebar. Their progress was slow but steady, guided by Bishop's precise knowledge of the route. Why, James? Bishop asked after several minutes of silence. 30 years of service, decorated operations, the respect of the entire intelligence community. Why betray everything you supposedly stood for? Sullivan was quiet for so long that Alexandria wondered if he would answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weariness that transcended physical illness. I didn't see it as betrayal, he said. I saw it as evolution. After Belgrade, after watching politics override intelligence and get good people killed, I was approached by individuals who offered a different paradigm. Intelligence guided by strategic necessity rather than political expediency. Resources allocated based on actual threats rather than election cycles. Vesper, Alexandria stated. Vesper was just the external face, Sullivan corrected. The Helix Directive was always the true organization, a network of senior officials across multiple agencies and governments who recognized the fundamental flaws in the existing system and decided to appoint themselves the secret architects of global security, Bishop added, her tone making clear what she thought of such arrogance. Sullivan didn't dispute the characterization. We achieved results. Prevented 3 major terrorist attacks that official channels missed. Stabilized regions that conventional diplomacy had abandoned. Created intelligence sharing protocols that saved countless lives, while eliminating anyone who threatened your operation, Alexandria reminded him, including American operatives who'd sworn the same oath you did. They reached the end of the tunnel, emerging into a small maintenance structure near the river's edge. Through its grimy windows, Alexandria could see the promised boat, a nondescript craft with an enclosed cabin, powerful enough for river navigation but unremarkable enough to avoid attention. Bishop secured the exit behind them, then led the way toward the vessel. Your justifications don't matter anymore, James. What matters is dismantling the network you helped build before. It does more damage. You're assuming I'm willing to testify, Sullivan observed as they reached the boat. Terminal diagnosis doesn't automatically make me suicidal. Alexandria watched the calculation in Sullivan's eyes, the veteran intelligence officer assessing options, angles, potential escape routes. Despite his illness, despite being outnumbered, Sullivan remained dangerous precisely because of his experience and training. You'll testify, Bishop stated with quiet certainty, because even after everything, some part of you still believes in the oath you took. Some part of you recognizes that the Helix Directive has become exactly what you claim to be fighting against, an unaccountable power operating above any oversight. Sullivan's expression revealed nothing, but he didn't contradict her assessment. They boarded the boat, Bishop taking the controls while Alexandria maintained position to monitor Sullivan. As they pulled away from the shore, emergency vehicles could be seen converging on the factory complex in the distance, lights flashing against the pre-dawn darkness. "Where are we going?" Sullivan asked as Bishop navigated the craft into the river's main channel. "Safe house outside Canadian jurisdiction," Bishop replied, "where you'll provide a complete deposition on the Helix Directive, its members, operations, financial structures, everything necessary to dismantle it permanently." Sullivan gazed at the receding shoreline, his expression contemplative. "And if I refuse?" "Then Valkyrie Protocol activates in 16 hours, Bishop stated. "Everything I've gathered goes public in raw form, without context or direction. Messy, incomplete, but enough to initiate investigations that will eventually uncover the truth anyway. Or," Alexandria added, "you cooperate fully. Provide testimony that allows for surgical removal of Helix's influence, while preserving the legitimate intelligence functions it has compromised. Your final act of service to the principles you once upheld." Sullivan turned to study Alexandria, seeing not the young operative he had betrayed 7 years ago, but the formidable intelligence officer she had become, tempered by adversity, strengthened by survival, defined by a code that had withstood the ultimate test. "You could have killed me back there," he observed. "After what I did to your team, no one would have questioned it." "That would have been vengeance," Alexandria replied evenly. "This is justice. Your testimony will dismantle the system that sacrificed good people for misguided ideals. That's worth more than the momentary satisfaction of putting a bullet in you." The boat cut through the dark waters, carrying the 3 intelligence veterans toward an uncertain future. Alexandria maintained her vigilance, recognizing that Sullivan, despite his apparent cooperation, remained a potential threat until his testimony was secured. As dawn broke over the river, Bishop navigated them toward a small dock connected to a private property on the American side of the border. The safe house, a modernized farmhouse set back from the water, showed no external signs of security, but Alexandria recognized the subtle indicators of a carefully maintained operational facility. "Welcome to Ghost Station," Bishop said, as they docked. "Officially decommissioned in 2012, unofficially maintained as my personal contingency location. No digital footprint, no connection to official channels. One of the few truly secure facilities left." Inside, the farmhouse revealed its true nature, a fully equipped intelligence station with secure communications, evidence processing capabilities, and comprehensive security systems. 2 operatives Alexandria didn't recognize greeted Bishop with the deference to a legendary commander. "Mockingbird is inside," one informed her. "Arrived 6 hours ago, as instructed." Bishop nodded. "Prepare the deposition room. Director Sullivan will be providing comprehensive testimony regarding the Helix Directive." As Sullivan was escorted to a secure room for medical evaluation before his deposition, Bishop led Alexandria to the facility's communication center. On multiple screens, information was being compiled, organized, and secured, the systematic dismantling of a conspiracy decades in the making. Mockingbird provided the final pieces, Bishop explained, indicating a thin man working intensely at one of the stations. Financial records linking Helix directors to operations dating back 20 years. Encrypted communications proving Sullivan's direct involvement in compromising your Blackfish mission. Everything necessary to expose the entire network. Alexandria studied the evidence with professional detachment, recognizing names and operations connected to her final mission. The betrayal that had destroyed her team and forced her into hiding had been merely one strand in a vast web of corruption and manipulation. Will it be enough? She asked. With Sullivan's testimony, yes, Bishop confirmed. Without it, Valkyrie Protocol remains our fallback, less surgical, but ultimately effective. Alexandria considered this. And after? When? The Helix directive is exposed and Sullivan has testified. Bishop's expression softened slightly. That depends on you. There's a place for Alexandria Mercer in the reorganized intelligence community, a chance to rebuild the systems that were corrupted, to implement the safeguards that should have existed. The offer was unexpected, a return to the life Alexandria had left behind, a chance to serve the principles she had never abandoned, despite their cost. Or, she prompted, sensing Bishop had more to say. Or Olivia Clarke returns to her diner in Harborview, Bishop continued. With enhanced security protocols, ongoing monitoring for potential threats, and the knowledge that her sacrifice helped dismantle one of the most dangerous internal threats our country has faced. The choice crystallized before her: return to the shadows of intelligence work, or reclaim the life she had built for herself in a small coastal town. Both paths had merit. Both represented forms of service and purpose. I need time, Alexandria said finally. Bishop nodded. Take all you need. Sullivan's deposition will require at least 48 hours to document completely. After that, the dismantling of Helix begins in earnest. Alexandria spent those hours observing Sullivan's testimony, watching as the architect of betrayal systematically exposed the organization he had helped build. Whether motivated by impending mortality, a desire to shape his legacy, or some remnant of the principles he had once upheld, Sullivan proved remarkably thorough in his disclosures. Names of Helix operatives embedded throughout government agencies, financial structures used to fund unauthorized operations, compromise methods employed against legitimate intelligence officers. The full scope of the Helix directive's infiltration emerged through his testimony, documented in detail, that would withstand the most rigorous investigation. On the third day, as Sullivan's deposition neared completion, Alexandria made her decision. She found Bishop in the facility's small kitchen, preparing coffee with the same precision she applied to intelligence operations. I'm returning to Harborview, Alexandria stated without preamble. Bishop nodded, unsurprised. I thought you might. The quiet life suited you more than you ever admitted. Not the same life, Alexandria clarified. I can't be Olivia Clarke again. That identity is compromised, but I can build something new there, something authentic. And if you're needed again? Bishop asked, her expression neutral but her meaning clear. Alexandria considered this possibility. The world has enough shadows, Elena. It needs people building something better in the light. Bishop smiled, a genuine expression rarely seen during their years working together. I was wrong about you, Alexandria. I always thought your greatest strength was your ability to become anyone necessary for the mission. But your actual gift is remaining yourself despite everything designed to break that core identity. They shared a moment of understanding that transcended words. Two women who had survived the darkest aspects of intelligence work with their essential humanity intact, though marked irrevocably by the experience. What will happen to Sullivan? Alexandria asked. Immunity in exchange for complete cooperation, Bishop replied. Given his prognosis, he'll likely not live to see the full dismantling of Helix, but his testimony ensures it will happen. Sometimes justice takes forms we don't anticipate. 3 days later, Alexandria stood on the pier in Harborview, watching fishing boats return with the evening tide. The town remained unchanged in her absence. The same rhythms, the same faces, the same sense of continuity that had drawn her there years ago. The Harbor Light Diner had continued operating under Jenny's management, its windows glowing warmly in the gathering dusk. Alexandria, now using the identity Catherine Hayes, had purchased a small cottage on the opposite side of town from her previous residence. A fresh start, but in familiar surroundings. As she walked along the waterfront, Alexandria reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. From elite operative to small-town diner owner to fugitive and back again, a journey marked by loss and betrayal, but also by resilience and ultimately, a kind of redemption. Sullivan's testimony had initiated the careful dismantling of the Helix Directive. Already, key operatives had been quietly removed from sensitive positions. Financial networks were being traced and frozen. The shadow organization that had compromised American intelligence for decades was being systematically exposed and eliminated. Alexandria's role in that operation would remain classified, known only to Bishop and a handful of trusted officials. Leading the cleanup effort, Catherine Hayes would simply be another newcomer to Harborview, perhaps with unusual skills and a certain watchfulness, but otherwise unremarkable. As she reached the town's small market, Alexandria purchased fresh ingredients for her evening meal, a simple ritual that had grounded her during her years as Olivia. The shopkeeper didn't recognize her, of course, but smiled with the easy friendliness that characterized the town. "New around here?" he asked as he bagged her purchases. "Just arrived," Alexandria confirmed. "Looking for some peace and quiet." "Well, you've come to the right place," the man assured her. "Harborview's about as peaceful as they come. Though, we did have some excitement a while back. Diner owner disappeared suddenly. Whole place surrounded by government types for a day or two. Town's still talking about it." Alexandria accepted the bag with a neutral smile. "Sounds unusual for a small town." "That's what makes it worthy of gossip," the shopkeeper laughed. "Not much happens here, which is why most of us chose it in the first place." As she left the market, Alexandria spotted a familiar figure on the opposite side of the street, Captain Reynolds, the retired military veteran who had always nodded respectfully to Olivia, one soldier recognizing another. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, and something in the old captain's gaze suggested he saw beyond the new appearance to something familiar beneath. He offered a slight nod, not of recognition, precisely, but of acknowledgement. One warrior to another, regardless of name or appearance. Alexandria returned the gesture before continuing toward her cottage. That evening, as she prepared a simple meal in her new kitchen, Alexandria's secure phone, the one Bishop had provided before they parted, chimed with an incoming message. The screen displayed a simple text: "Helix dismantling proceeding. As planned. S provided final testimony before hospice transfer. Your team has been officially cleared and honored posthumously. Rest well, Kingfisher." Alexandria read the message twice before deleting it permanently. Sullivan would die soon, his legacy irrevocably altered by his final act of disclosure. The colleagues Alexandria had lost in the betrayed Blackfish operation would receive the recognition they deserved, their sacrifices acknowledged and honored. And the Helix Directive, the shadow organization that had corrupted American intelligence, from within, would be systematically dismantled, its threat eliminated. It was as close to justice as their world allowed. Alexandria stepped onto her small porch, watching twilight settle over Harborview. Fishing boats secured for the night, lights appearing in windows along the shore, the rhythmic sound of waves. Against the rocky coastline, a world apart from surveillance operations and classified betrayals. The skills remained, of course. The vigilance that had kept her alive through years of deep cover operations. The tactical awareness that noted escape routes and defensive positions, even in this peaceful setting. The capacity for necessary violence. That had made Kingfisher legendary in intelligence circles. But Catherine Hayes would use those skills differently than Kingfisher had. To protect rather than infiltrate. To build rather than destroy. To create a life defined by choices made. Freely rather than operational necessity. As darkness fell completely over the Maine coastline, Catherine Hayes, once Alexandria Mercer, once Olivia Clarke, once Kingfisher, turned back toward the warm light of her cottage. Tomorrow would bring new beginnings in this small town. That had once given shelter to a ghost on the run and now offered something more valuable. The chance to be simply, authentically human. Behind her, the ocean continued its ancient rhythm against the shore, washing away footprints just as time would gradually fade the sharpest edges of her past. Not erasing what had happened, but eventually transforming it into something she could carry without being defined by its weight. For now, that was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.